Okay, this is going to be a review of the Unity Hub, how to download and update your Unity version installs, and how to start a new project for 3D world building, okay, in Unity. So I've opened up my Unity Hub, and you'll notice that it'll either say you need to restart to update your hub here, or it will look like this. This is the newest version of the hub. You'll see several things here on my hub underneath my projects. You see all these big red warnings here. Okay, these are nothing to worry about if you have projects that have these on them. These are easily fixable. Basically, what this warning is about is that after people have published their games to platforms like Steam or onto web built or other kinds of platforms, Apple, etc., there is a known uh, weakness for hackers. So what you'll have to do is to install a newer version. Now, to do this, we go to our installs, and you'll see what we have already installed, the versions that we have installed. And you can just hover over these to see the warnings. So I've downloaded, to save us time, the newest version here of Unity 6.3. Now, it's not necessary that you have 6.6000.3, but you can have just regular old 6000.0, either one. Now, you'll find this in your install editor. These are the versions that they recommend to the latest version, which I have just downloaded for you, this 6.3 LTS. So if you remember, it means long-term service. This is supported over a long term, meaning like if you publish the game with this, it'll be continue to be supported for years and years by Unity, even if they have newer versions. So make sure that you install the newest ones. I could install this other 6.0 and this 2022.3 here to patch my other ones that have the warnings. But for right now, I'm just going to use the 6.3. Feel free to use 6.0. That works great as well. And in fact, I think it works better than 6.3. So either one will work for our project that we're going to be doing. Okay, so now that I know I have an up-to-date one here, I can start my new project. And I'm going to go ahead and install it. Now, if I want to build it out to a certain platform, this is where I want to check and my boxes and say where do I want to build out. So I have my Windows support, my Mac build support, and my Android build support all checked. Now, if you're building it out to say like a VR headset, something like that, you would click here, and all these extra SDKs would get downloaded into your new project ahead of time. You can always do this later through the settings, so it isn't required to do it now, but I always try and have the ones that I think, if I'm going to build something out, added. So continue. Of course, you have to sign your agreement, and we will wait for it to install. So what I think I'll do is I will pause while. But first, let's review a little bit here, the other sections. In the newest version of this hub, you'll see that there's things that are put up here for learning new lessons. And you've got resources, which used to be under community. This is like the asset store. We have like 3 or 4 ways to get to the asset store. And then, of course, the licenses that you hold, which I have a personal license, which I started in 2021. Okay. So now that we've reviewed the hub, let's go back to projects. And I'm going to start a new project. Okay. Now, the first thing you want to remember is you need to choose your version here. And I'm obviously going to choose the one that doesn't have any warnings that I've just downloaded, this 6.3. Okay. And we want to open a regular universal 3D core. And if you remember, universal stands for Universal Render Pipeline. That is the middle pipeline. We have the built-in pipeline, which is really like the old versions for low poly count, right? Things like mobile only or mobile platforms only. And then we have the universal, which actually has very nice graphics and everything for mostly done for desktop computer works, which is what we're going to do, but it can also be used for mobile. And then we've got the HD high definition render pipeline here. Okay, this is used for high-end console games. We really don't need to use this one. It takes a lot of processing power for our computer. And so it's better that we use this universal 3D core here. So I've had to choose my version, my template, and if I haven't used it before, it'll say, do you want to download template? Say yes, you do. And then your organization. You may have one or two. I have a personal one and I have a university one. I'm going to change the name and name my project here. So I'm going to call this World Building. And I can put the date so I don't forget. So maybe I want to put spring 26. Okay. And then I need to know where I'm going to be saving it. So you can say, where do you want to save it also? Here in the location. So make sure you know where you're saving it, especially if you're going to be using a computer that is not your own, so you can find it easily. So I'm going to go ahead and create the project, and this will take a few minutes. Okay, I've opened up my new project, and let's take a look at the layout here. Now I've got a layout that I like to use, but remember you can change your layout in any way that you want. You can move things around. Usually the default, this will be right here and you'll be able to switch back and forth. When I'm doing this 3D world building, I often like to have it, separate. So I try and put them then side by side, and then I can just toggle over and see my game view and my scene view at the same time. Okay. It opens up on a sample scene, but we don't want to have a sample scene. We want to go to a regular scene. But first, let's take care of downloading all the packages we'll need for this project. So to remember where the package manager is, it's under Window in your upper toolbar, okay? And you want to go to your package manager here under package management. You can also get to the asset store here, okay? This is in the 6.3 version. You can, if it's in the 6.0 version, you'll find it here. It'll say asset store. So here under 6.3, it's called package management. Every time they upgrade, they change this toolbar, so it takes a little bit of getting used to. Okay, so if I click on my package manager, I already have mine docked here next to my hierarchy. I don't have to dock it there. I can dock it anywhere I want to, but for me, it fits really well here next to my hierarchy. And all I have to do is just slide this over so I can see it. Okay, so I want to have my package manager open so I can see what's inside my project that I have down here in my files right now. Okay, now because this is slightly different than 2022.3, you'll want to be aware of how to find the things in your project. It used to be in 2022.3, you'd have a drop down up here that showed these things here. Now you can just go to them here and say, okay, what's in my project? What's in the Unity registry? What assets do I already have? Okay, and what have already been built in? And services are for things like publishing. Okay, so you'll see this little note here that says updates. We want to update everything before we start working in our project. So for example, timeline, we're going to be using timeline. So we definitely want to make sure that's updated. So if you need to do these updates, go ahead and locate them and update them before we actually start building in our scene. Okay. So once you do that, we're going to search, instead of in project, we're going to go to the Unity registry and search for, we have a few packages we need to do. So Terrain Tools. Here we have Terrain Tools. And over here we have a couple of different options. So let me just slide this over so you can see it a little better. So we have the details of it, right? The minimum version for this Terrain Tools version is 6.0, so you can use 6.0 or in 6.3. You have the different versions of it, okay, that you can install. And then you have the things that it depends on to use in here. So these will also be installed once you hit install. So let's go ahead and hit install and install it into our project. Just take a second. Okay, now it's installed into our project, and if I did a search, which I will again in a minute in project, I will be able to find it. Once it's installed, you can see that I have two options here. So there's a demo scene from the asset store, or there are asset samples from the asset store. So I highly recommend that you download the asset samples from the asset store. Um, the demo scene, I would skip that because sometimes it has scripting in it that can conflict with things that we already are going to have going on. So, but I would definitely download the asset samples. So you'll see it'll take me directly to the asset store. And I'm going to go ahead and, as soon as it reloads here, open it in Unity. So it knows that I already have purchased this before. Otherwise, it would say, do you want to add to your assets? So I'm going to say, yes, I want to open this in Unity. I'm going to open the link. And then you'll see that my list is refreshing here. And it's saying, oh, okay, let's go ahead and import it into project. Now we have all these warnings here. So it's saying that it has dependencies, which means it's dependent on other modules that are already in our project, but we need to either install them or have them upgrade. And we want to say yes. Never just say skip. So we want to make sure that everything that this asset pack is dependent on will be installed. Great. So now it says in project. So perfect. We can go back to our project and we can see where there are errors. Um, right now it's saying, oh, there's something in the visual code editor. I will go back to this, but I don't need to worry about that right now. We now have our terrain tools in our project. If I search it, you can see we have terrain tools and the asset pack. Okay, which is exactly what we want. Now we want to search in the Unity registry for Probuilder. Okay, so we have Probuilder. We want to install Probuilder. Great. So in our project, just we double check it by seeing if it's in here. Yes, it is. Okay, so we're pretty much set now to open up our new scene. Let's just double check anything that needs to be updated. So we definitely want to update the visual scripting. We don't necessarily need to do, but if you have any of these like timeline, you definitely want to update this. Okay, great. So we have now updated everything that we need. inside of our project to start our project, you'll see we can double check everything. We have a visual code editor, which actually I can take out, and I would remove this error because it's depreciated, which means it's no longer supported. But beyond that, everything looks great. So let's go back to our hierarchy. I'm going to slide over my scene and game views, and you can see that we're on the sample scene. Now, I really don't want to start on this sample scene. I want to start on a scene of my choosing. And the easiest way to do that is to open up my project folder and click on my assets. And in here, in this area here, I'm going to right click and create a new folder. And I'm going to name it Stacey. Just a reminder, you can use this little slider bar down here to change this into icons or lists. You know, I use both just depending on if I have a lot of things that I'm looking for, or if I'm deciding that I just want a really quick, easy way to see things. So I'm going to double click and open my folder, Stacey. You can see it down under here in assets. And here I'm going to right click and create a scene. And I'm going to call this Terrain Tools Playground, because this is just, we're going to explore terrain tools in this one. I'm going to double click to open it. And here you can see it says Terrain Tools Playground up here, and that means this one is open and active. All right, let's go over what's in the default a little bit. We've got our main camera, and you can see this over here. We're going to be downloading a couple more things from our package manager later, which is going to give us multiple cameras. But for right now, we have this in here, and our directional light. If you remember, our directional light simulates the sun, but doesn't actually appear as a sun in the sky. You can rotate it to change the lighting. You see over here in my game setting, you can see how it's adjusting my lighting there. You can see this more once we have a terrain in. Okay, so we want to go ahead and start a new terrain. I'm going to right click here, and I'm going to go to 3D Object, and I'm going to go to Terrain. I'm going to open this here. And immediately you can see a platform that's opened up. Let me zoom out a little bit for you. A checkerboard kind of platform. This is our terrain, and we're going to start building on this. Now, in order to use this terrain, we want to look in, have it selected, and look over here into our inspector. And in our inspector, you have a bunch of different buttons here under terrain, and this is where we're going to be editing our terrain. So let's go through them one at a time. This is the Create Neighbor terrain. Now, if I go back in here into my scene view and pull this out, you can see that I have this terrain now with these little squares here. This means that I can add other terrains and extend onto my terrains to make them larger if I want to. Keep in mind that each of these terrains is very large, so I don't need all of these. Maybe in your world you're going to need them, but it depends on what you want to do. But just note that it's here for you if you want to use it. So each of these terrains is like, I want to say it's like 100 kilometers by 100 kilometers, something like this. It's quite large. So you don't necessarily need to use it. What I might want to do is adjust my camera, because you can see my camera is um, a little bit strange the way it's looking. So if I go into my camera, let's see if I move it upward and tilt it down so that at least I can get a better view of my terrain as I'm building it. It'll be easier than later on. So if I want to see it from far away, for example. Okay, so that'll help give me a little bit of a better view. It's still not great, so I need to adjust it a little bit. Still quite low. You can see where it's pointed. So I want it to actually point at my whole terrain. As like an aerial view for later so I can actually see it through my game view when I'm looking here. Okay, it's relatively good. I can adjust it again later because I'm going to be using multiple cameras later anyways, but this just gives me an aerial view as I'm building and it helps me to see it a little bit better. I'll slide it over just a little bit more. Okay. All right, now I'm going to zoom back into my terrain so I can start building it. Okay, so that's our neighboring terrain. Second, let's go to this little one here that has a mountain on it. This is a very important one because it's how we're going to build the height and verticality of our terrain. We want to go in here. You'll see we have a drop down bar that has a whole bunch of things that you can do. But what we first want to do is raise or lower terrain. Now, these are our brush shapes, and we have all different kinds of sizes. You can see as I drag my mouse over this, I'm going to actually hide my game view right now so you get to see this better. As I drag my mouse over the terrain, it's a little bit small, my brush stroke now, so you can't really see it. So let's increase my brush size. Oh, I'm on my game scene, that's why. Okay, and you can see now my brush. Now, if I click on one of these and hold my left mouse key down and drag it to the right, you can see it starts building up some mountains. So the longer I hold it and jiggle it in one place, it will build up height. And that's with whatever shape you choose. So I want you to go around and play with a few of these. You can adjust your brush size to be quite large or small. You can rotate it. You can increase the strength of it. Um, you can increase the scatter of it if you want to. You can see like how it makes that a little bit bigger and it's dropping things a little bit further away. So go ahead and take a few minutes, put this on pause, and play around with the different brush settings and build some mountains. If you want to lower this terrain, what you have to do is push your shift key down and hold your left mouse button. And you should be able to reverse any of the brushes that you've chosen. So I can just flatten them back out by hitting the shift key on Mac. I believe it's the same for Windows. So anytime I want to just get rid of it, I can do that. Or remember that if I do something and I hit Control Z or Command Z, it will take away the last things that I've done. So I can go back step by step and reverse things that I've done. All right, so go ahead and pause here, and then we'll come back and we'll go over the next section. Okay, hopefully you have a basic terrain now kind of set up and you've had a chance to experiment with all the different brushes. All right, now we're going to look at a couple other tools that are also in underneath this mountain here button. So we have things like erosion, which you can create hydraulic, which means water or thermal or wind erosion. It's the same thing. You can choose this. You'll choose your brush and you can cause them to go like through here. So depending on what you choose, it's like a river coming down. I want to increase my brush strength. And you can see how it's causing these cracks here to cause these erosion. So you can experiment with something like that. Okay. What else? Let's look through here. We have sculpt. You can create noise, which is like a vibration sort of thing. You can create terraces. You can create bridges that extend out from one peak to another. Okay. You have effects like flattening, sharpening peaks, or contrast. You can pinch, smudge, and twist. You can paint holes. Paint holes I want to talk about for a second. If you do paint holes, what it is doing is it is removing the mesh here. So that means it's like taking away that invisible fence that we can put textures and things like this on. So it will be like a hole in your terrain. So I say use these with caution because you would have to put in some sort of asset inside of that hole, like a building or something that you downloaded from the asset store and connect it on the other side. So it's basically you're putting a hole through the mesh of this 3D modeling project, which is your terrain. Okay. So use those with caution. Okay. Stamp is just what it says. So you can choose this and you can stamp objects. It just depends on kind of what you're going for. You can even see I've got my wireframe on here, so you can see all the little angles of my mesh down in here. But it's up to you how you want to use this and use all these little tools. I think there's a star in here somewhere. There's lots more brushes in here than in the old version. And you can just, stamp these. Make sure that you can rotate to change so they don't repeat. So you can see it's rotated it slightly. I can even do it extreme so you can see that it completely shifts it. These kind of things all are fun, but use sparingly because they do look kind of weird if you don't integrate them carefully. Okay. What else do we have? Smoothing height. You can set a height and use this as high as your mountains will go. So you can create like roadways with using a height, setting your height to something, some sort of height. And where's your height? Verticality. You can set all the different things here, okay? I don't use it very often. I tend to build my roads as paths, like through woods. That's just up to you how you want to do it. Um, and finally, we have paint texture. Now, paint texture is quite important. This is what we're going to be doing next. There's a couple things that we need to do to start here. Okay, so we're going to start putting a few textures on here like snow, grass, sand. But in order to do that, we have to first fill them from our layer palette. So we first have to look, okay, where can we find a layer? So let's add a layer. And because we downloaded the terrain asset sample pack, we have a whole bunch here. You can also download them from the asset store if these aren't going to work for you, and upload them and download them into your project so you have more variety. Now, when you click on the first one, it's going to put it completely over your entire terrain. So don't freak out, that's okay. So think about the very base layer that you would want to have somewhere. So I'm going to say I'm going to put like some pebbles on mine. I'll double click it and you'll see this blue means it's processing, graphically processing, and it has placed it over my entire terrain. But don't worry because I can add another layer. I'm going to add something like this grass and rocks here, okay? And I'm going to add some snow maybe. Actually, I want to add some rock terrain and I want to add some sand and maybe I want to add some mud. Okay. Now, if I zoom way in, because it's a very large terrain. And I keep zooming in. You can see that the base layer that I added with the pebbles is quite detailed. So let me just click here so you can see how detailed this is. So keep in mind that your terrain is quite large, and when you're far away and adding these kind of assets, it doesn't seem like much, but it actually is. So you might want to be a little closer. You can see it tiles out over the whole thing. So when you're adding um, maybe different styles of assets here, you want to be a little closer just to see the details of it. Okay, so I'm going to add some grass up. I'm going to have this be like a lake, and I'm going to add some grass around here. You can see my brush size is quite small, so I want to increase my brush size a bit. And I'm going to just kind of left click and paint in some grasses here that head towards my lake because it's always green where there's water. Okay, so if I zoom in, let me go off this and zoom in. You should be able to see it. Come on, baby. It's trying its best. My computer's like trying to process as I move close because it does take a bit of processing power. There, you can see my grass is a little bit better now. And it's layered on top of the pebbles. So it's got kind of a mixed terrain, which is perfect for me. That's what I'm looking for. Okay. Now, as I go out again, I can start adding other things. So if I want to add rocks, for example, up here, I'll go down here, add this rock texture, and I can increase my brush size actually. So I can do it a little bit faster and maybe my brush strength. And you can see that this is changing to a rock texture. It might not be super easy to see um, because it's the same color as my gravel here, but trust me, it is. Let me just pull my brush size down a little bit. Oh, I clicked on my grass. Sorry. Click on rocks here. So if I zoom in over here, you should be able to see my rocks. Problem is you have to get quite close to it. And I don't like this brush shape either. I want it to be this shape here. So now you can see the rocks that have been created. I had a weird brush shape, so it's a little bit strange, but it is actually quite detailed. Okay, so go ahead and add all the surface textures onto your terrain. So that will include adding snow, sand, whatever it needs, depending on what you're using yours for. Okay, keep in mind that wherever your character is going to be, it's going to be looking out towards the horizon line. So make sure that your horizon line is looking the way you want it, that you're not just seeing out here. We can also change our skybox to cover that up, and I'll show you how to do that in a little while. Let's move on to our next button. Okay, here, this is where we start to paint trees. It's very similar to painting the textures onto our terrain. So I haven't really done much more decorating here, but what I'm going to do is show you how to use the trees in this button. We have to add trees first, just like we had to add textures into our texture palette on the last one. So let's edit trees and add a tree. And you'll see you get this little palette here. And you want to go to this little tool right here and click on it because it's going to go into our assets and look for anything that might be considered a tree. So all these bushes are quite large. So you want to use anything that's a large bush or a tree. You can download lots of trees from the asset store. I'm going to go ahead and download this, maybe this bush here, and add it. And I have it here. I can have a whole bunch of trees here. When I'm clicked on it, you can see that it gives me also a brush that I can paint in these. How many of these little bushes do I want in that brush size? Okay. Do I want them to be random? And how random do I want them to be? I can increase my randomness or decrease my randomness. Okay, do I want to lock width to height? Yeah, I do, or sometimes they look kind of weird. I can even add color variation amounts here. Okay, um, let's go ahead and I'm going to click and hold, and I'm going to add some of these grasses, bushes. You can see that it's blue at first. That's because it's processing. So if I move in after it processes for up close, you can see that I've got all these bushes here. And you can see that they're moving, which is very cool because SpeedTree enables you to have this wind effect, which I'll show you in a few minutes on how you can adjust that. So you can see that anywhere that I put them, they've gone this way. Okay, I'm also going to show you a very fast way to do it if you have a bunch of different trees. And this is by placing them all at once, which you can do. It's called mass place trees, and I'm looking for it here. Maybe it's because I don't have a tree in here, but you are able to do mass placing of trees. Ah, here it is, mass place trees. Okay, so if I want to mass place trees, I click on this, and it's going to say to me, how many trees do I want? Do I want to take out the old trees? I'm going to take out the old trees that I've already done, and I'm going to say place. And what it does is it places them all over my terrain, so that when I go in, you can see that it's randomly placed them over my entire terrain. And that makes it pretty simple to place them all over everywhere on your terrain. So if I zoom in here, you'll see them there. In order to remove trees, it's kind of the same thing I did before. You're going to left click and hold down I believe it's the command button. Nope, it's the shift button. And you can erase where any of your trees are, because I obviously don't want them in the middle of my lake here, so I hit erase there. Okay, so that's that. You add any trees in here. Keep your smaller objects like small rocks and grasses. We're going to add that to the next button here, which is your detail one. And just like before, you have to add them in first into your palette. So where it says list is empty, you need to add in your grasses from here. So add a grass texture, and you're going to look for it here. You can usually find them somewhere in here. Let's see what we've got. We've got we want some small grasses. And you want your albedo colored ones. So let's see. Maybe I want this one. And I can add it then to my list, and I can start using it. Okay, so once again, it's like, how big do you want it to be? How much do you want inside the density? You can lower this down, use your brush size to add them. Okay, your grasses, they're small, so you have to zoom in to see them. Okay, you can also add here on this list, you can add small rocks, you can add things like this. Okay, so feel free to go ahead and experiment with this as well. and add these details. Usually I like to go in under my trees, so I like to do it in the order of the buttons. Once I put my trees in, I'll go in for more detail. Let me make my brush size much smaller, and then add, as I see fit, all these small, as you can see, smaller, let me make this small so you can see, smaller grasses. Okay, so this would be like in between your trees. And how do you know how big your terrain is? This is the last thing I'll show you before your settings. If you go here and add a 3D object as a cube, okay, so I've added a cube here. And if you remember, a cube is 1 meter by 1 meter by 1 meter. So if we change this upward to 2, this gives us the basic size of a human being that would be in our world. So as you can see, our world is very big compared to a person and our character. So if you are confused about how big is everything in your world, just add one of these cubes so you can see relatively how big it is to what you're building. Okay. Another great thing to do with a cube is that when you move it around, it's easy to find it by double clicking on it in your hierarchy. So if I go to my cube here by double clicking and I pull back, I can start to see, oh, those are how big the bushes are that I added, right? And how big the grasses are that I added, how big my trees are, how big my world is as I look around. You can see one terrain size should be plenty big for you. Okay. All right. Final thing on terrain tools. I'm going to go back to click on select my terrain, is this terrain settings tool here. This gives you the settings for your entire terrain. Okay, so you can see the size of it. You can see how the tree details, how dense they are. You can adjust any of these kind of things. You can set how strong the wind is on your grasses and your bushes. So if I increase the wind speed, you should be able to see it in real time change. Okay, so it just go ahead and go through this. Here's how big my terrain is. If I want to change the size of my terrain, I can do it here. The maximum, the height that it is. Okay. So this is all your basic settings. I usually just mostly leave mine in default. Sometimes I adjust, like maybe the wind, things like this. Okay. So have fun, experiment around, build yourself rough terrain. Make sure you put in a cube so you can see it. All right. Remember, I'll review one other thing on how to change the skybox so that you can dramatically change what your project looks like. So if I go up to Window and I go to Rendering, under here I've got this window called Lighting. Okay. I keep mine next to my inspector in the world so that I can adjust it quite quickly. If I open this up and click on Environment, I've got my default skybox. This is adding to my directional light. So I've got two lights in here, which is the light coming from my skybox, which is what the sky looks like, and my directional light. So if I want to change my skybox, I can click here. If I've got another skybox downloaded, I can add it to the list. I actually don't have any downloaded, so I will download these and send them to you in your next video. But if you download other skyboxes like Milky Way or something like this, you can add it. You can also add your own skybox that you take by taking a 360 panorama photo with your phone, and you can import it in as your own skybox. Okay. All right. I will talk to you next week and enjoy experimenting around with terrain tools and get ready to build your own real terrain next week.